Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Blue Collar Real Estate. I'm Greg Mayo.
And I'm Ryan Herget.
Hey, we're starting a new series this week on Green Building and Green Remodeling. I couldn't be more excited.
I am excited about this. This is going to be a lot of fun because this is something you and I are both passionate about, and I don't think gets talked about enough in the construction industry and especially the real estate industry.
It really doesn't, and there's a lot of misconceptions. We're going to get into that, but before we do, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear from you. Today's episode brought to you by Stanley Sushi Buffet and Laundromat.
Yeah.
Because if you eat at our buffet and fill your belly, we'll help you clean your pants. So that's kind of where we're going with that.
Oh, I'm sure that's a good place. I'm sure they get lots of traffic in there. So, Greg, we're going to talk about green today. So what exactly does that mean when somebody says we want to talk about green building? I know energy efficiency comes up a lot, but what exactly is green when it comes to construction, when it comes to this whole thing?
Well, that's a great question. And let me say this first. I want to talk a little bit about why green matters, and then we'll get into kind of what it is. Building, remodeling green is not a political issue. You can make it one if that's your thing, but it's not a political issue. For me, it's a stewardship issue. My dad always taught me, if you borrow somebody's tools, you return them in better condition than you got them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I agree completely.
I used to work with a guy building docks out at Heritage Lake, and he would let me borrow anything I wanted because before I turned it back in, I'd clean it, oil it, and it was in better condition. Well, it's the same thing with our planet. We're just here for a whisper of time, right? And we've been given this planet to use, but not to abuse. So to me, it's a stewardship issue. We only have so much air and water. We only have so many natural resources. We need to protect it. By the way, on the thing of water, you realize since the beginning of the earth, whether you're a biblical 6,000-year-old earth or a 10 billion-year-old earth, whatever, there has always been the exact same amount of water there is today.
I did not know that interesting fact.
The earth has an amazing way of recycling it. So we're all drinking right here in my bottle. That's dinosaur pee. Anyway, so as we get into talking about green, we're going to talk about net zero.
Now, what's that mean? Because that's a term that I don't think a lot of people are familiar with. When you say net zero, what's that mean? Is that the carbon footprint that a house leaves? Tell us about that.
Yeah, net zero just basically means that the home or the building produces as much energy as it uses.
Okay, got it.
And we get to that by not only using things like solar power or wind power, or if you're in an area where you can, hydroelectric power, or you could have a mini nuclear reactor at your house, I guess, if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. You can't have one. Anyway, and it's also about building energy efficiently, well insulating the house so that air, heat, cool doesn't get in and out. So, but net zero is basically just, if you're going to take anything away from it, your home produces as much energy as it uses.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
Well,
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And that's a real good concept with new construction. A little harder to do with remodels. And with remodels, we have something called a passive house.
Yep.
Can also be new construction. But there's a lot of companies. There's one actually up in Vancouver right now that's doing passive house retrofits.
So let's dive in right there, because you just threw out two terms, net zero and passive house. Many people may not be familiar with what that means, especially our real estate audience may not be familiar with exactly what that means. So let's talk about each one of those a little bit. Net zero meaning it, puts out as much energy as it consumes. But what's passive mean? Walk us through that.
A passive house basically is an energy efficient home that uses the energy sources inside the home.
Such as what?
Well, there's actually ways to collect the heat generated or energy generated by the bodies, the people in the house, not the bodies in your basement. That's different. But also by using larger windows in certain areas to get that solar heat gain and the heat effect coming through. There's also air exchangers that bring in cool air from the outside. They heat it. Now, this is cool, and you have to picture the exchanger kind of doing this kind of thing. But they heat the cool air with the heat from the exhaust air that's going out. So passive house, we take the energy we can get from inside the building.
Got it.
There's also insulation qualities with that. There's also you can do solar with that. But I was watching a video the other day on a passive house they were doing, post-World War II bungalow. We've got thousands of those in any city.
Oh, absolutely.
And especially in Indianapolis too. And so there's these little 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalows, and they're perfect for retrofitting for a passive house. You go in, you put insulation from the inside because you don't want to redo all that plaster and lath.
Right.
You can go to the outside, buck out the framing a little bit. This particular company was doing a spray foam insulation on the outside and then re-siding. So you end up with a wall this thick full of insulation.
Yeah.
You end up with a R value of 40 or 50.
Which is compared to what? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are not familiar with is, when you say R value, R value is the resistance that air can flow through something. And,
right.
And so when you say R value, a standard wall that has 2x4 construction has an R value of what? 13?
13 to 19.
13 to 19. And now we're literally talking about going almost 4 times that. So you can imagine the energy efficiency the energy savings that you're going to have when you've literally got 4 times the insulation. I mean, I was reading a statistic a few months ago that Owens Corning put out that says 90% of all homes that are out there right now are not insulated properly. And you just gave a very awesome idea on what you can do from a wall standpoint. I know that can also go up into the attic, but that's a huge thing. People complain all the time about, their energy bills and ways to save money. And if you're going to be in your home for a period of time, 3 or 4 years, this stuff literally pays for itself, does it not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that's really important. And as we get into more of the green topic, you're going to spend a little more upfront to do it the right way and to use some of these technologies. But the payback
absolutely
over time, and for some items it can be 2 to 3 years, for others it's 7 to 8. But the amount of savings you're going to get, the one passive house I was talking about, they were speculating that when the property was finished, now this is in Vancouver, it's up in Canada, as opposed to Vancouver, Ohio, I don't know.
I have no idea.
But their big thing was that they would reduce their energy cost in the house by 90%.
That's substantial.
That's 90% savings. So it does pay for itself over time. And then after you get your payback time, then from then on, it's just clear money.
Without a doubt. So we've talked a little bit about insulation. What are some other ways that, people can maybe consider, using green technology, green products in order to save more money on their heating and cooling bills, or just simply, reducing the carbon footprint of their house?
Well, let's go into the heating and cooling system, which is a big energy user, especially in Indiana. In Indiana, on any given day, you might have your heat on, and then because it's 20 degrees outside, but 6 months from then, it's going to be 95 degrees outside, and you're going to be kicking your air conditioner in the can. So energy efficiency with your HVAC system is huge. You also need to incorporate in your HVAC system, say that 5 times fast. You also need to incorporate air exchangers. You got to bring fresh air in from the outside and exhaust the polluted air.
Yeah.
Because the tighter houses get, the more air can't get out. If you go buy a house tomorrow that has not been altered, renovated, or anything, that was built in 1900, you'll get fresh air in.
Yes, plenty through the doors, the windows, everywhere. Yes.
So in the HVAC technology, I was watching the first season of This Old House the other day. Yes, the very first season.
That was a day or two ago now.
1979, and I was watching the first season, and they were talking about the efficiency of the boiler system they were using in this house, which 40 years ago, it was an efficient system. Today, the difference between what we have, it's like the modern age and the Stone Age. The efficiency of new units, and if you get a unit, gas or electric, that's 95, 98% efficient, you're going to save money, you're going to use less energy. People think electricity is cleaner than gas. I just had this conversation with my builder the other day. And yeah, I mean, it is depending on where the electricity comes from.
Sure.
In Indiana, it comes from burning coal. Now,
is that cleaner? Maybe not.
I think probably no. There's clean coal technology in this and that and the other, but at the end of the day, you're burning coal, and coal's dirty.
Let's kind of take that right there, because you just talked about the more efficient furnaces and HVAC systems, but I'm going to throw a curveball at you here real quick, and this is not in our notes here, but there's so many ways that somebody can tackle, okay, I want to, reduce the, my home's carbon footprint, and I want to save money on heating and cooling cost. And I'm going to name a few here, but you've got windows, okay? And windows
huge.
You talk to a window contractor and they're going to tell you that, windows are the best way to do that. You've got insulation both in walls and in attics, okay? You've got, the HVAC system within itself. You've got simply just, being conscientious about how you live in your house as well, all ways that you can save money. Where would you recommend, if somebody, this is something that's important to somebody, where would you recommend they start first if they've got that, post World War II bungalow, or they've even got a home built in the 80s or 90s? All of that stuff is eventually going to need to be done. Where do you recommend somebody start first in order to get the biggest bang for their buck?
That's a great question. The first thing I would recommend is your attic.
Yeah.
Regardless of when your house was built.
Why?
Because heat rises.
Yep.
And a lot of it goes out through the attic. If you're living in a post-World War II bungalow, then your attic is likely insulated with cellulose.
And you've probably got less than 3 to 6 inches in there because that's what was building code at the time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and compression over time.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to settle.
Ground up newspaper with chemicals in it over time will settle and compress. Mm-hmm. It'll do that in your walls too. We'll get to that in a minute. But so you want to check there first and add insulation. Now that's a real easy do-it-yourself project.
It really is. Yep.
Menards, Home Depot, probably Lowe's too. If you rent the blower machine, mm-hmm. they'll let you have it for free for the day if you buy enough bags of insulation to blow it.
Yeah, and I've done that a handful of times myself. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but it's also not the worst. And the returns on that are literally immediate. You're going to be able to set your thermostat down a couple degrees, and it's going to stay at that temperature substantially longer because that warm air is not getting out. 40% of all energy loss is through the attic because of what you just said. Warm air rises, right?
Right.
So that's the easiest and probably most cost effective. I know you can do that anywhere. Hell, if you do it yourself, you can do it for less than $1,000. You pay somebody to do it, you're probably going to spend $2,000, $2,500, depending on how big of a house you have, of course. But ultimately, that's a heck of a lot less than a new HVAC system. It's a hell of a lot less than new windows throughout your entire home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that's the first place you would recommend somebody start if this is an objective that they have with their home?
That would be the first thing I would look at. The second thing is, and this is a really cheap one, walk around to your windows and doors and look for either daylighting, through the gap. I don't know what that was. Through the gap?
That was sort of a gap.
But look for that, and also feel for cold air coming through, especially this time of the year if you're in the Midwest or central Indiana like we are. Look for places that you can add weather stripping,
mm-hmm.
which we talked about in an episode before. Weather stripping we also talked about in our Christmas video.
Yeah, go check that out on YouTube. That was a pretty spectacular singing performance we put on there, wasn't it?
And then, it was stellar. In fact, the Grammys have called. I told them we're not in it for the awards, but
it's not surprising after that performance.
But the other, and then you want to start budgeting for insulating your walls,
mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is either from the inside or the outside. If you don't want to tear off all the wall covering, the plaster and lath,
probably not.
They'll drill a hole about like yay, and they'll either fill it with spray foam insulation, my personal favorite,
mm-hmm.
or cellulose. Why do I like spray foam better? Because it doesn't compress over time like cellulose does.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've got these cool spray foams. Wow, I just nailed the table. They got some that are soy-based, that are plant-based oils that they make instead of polystyrene or polypropylene. It's fantastic stuff. It's so cool. I kind of geek out a little bit.
I could tell. I love that.
But that's another big thing. The other thing is, so windows, and you get the walls insulated. If you have a crawl space or a basement, let's not forget we need to do something about air infiltration down there too.
Mm-hmm.
Having your crawl space encapsulated. One of my sons does that for a living, foundation and crawl space work. Having your crawl space encapsulated removes so much, not only mold and other spores that'll be in the air, but it also tempers the climate down there a little bit.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you're sealing that whole area off, obviously.
Right.
So that makes all the sense in the world. So we've talked a little bit about windows. We've talked a little bit about attic and wall insulation. We've definitely talked about the furnace, and what are some other ways? Let's kind of transition a little bit from just those items to what are some of the products maybe that people could use that are going to be more efficient or more green simply?
Well, we'll get into that in the next episode.
Oh, I'm jumping ahead, am I?
Because because that's some cool stuff, and we might actually end up spending a couple episodes on that. But one thing I do want to talk about, if you're considering building and you want to go green, I've got a builder right now I'm working with as his agent, and the stuff he's doing is super cool. We've done some Facebook Live videos from there. He's using a product called ICF, which stands for
ICF, Insulated Concrete Forms, right?
Boom.
Heck yeah. I'm better at this.
And I think we have a picture. So there's the house right now.
Okay, so if you're not on YouTube and you're watching this or listening to this on a podcast platform, go to YouTube and check this out, because we're going to show you a couple photos of exactly what this looks like here. So check this out on YouTube or Facebook. But Greg, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's because I almost forgot to say that. So this is the house. The blue is the insulated concrete form, and we'll show those in just a second. But what you end up with not only is a virtual bomb shelter for a house, but they're concrete forms that look like cinder blocks, but they're made out of foam, and they have brackets in the middle. And then once the wall is erected, it kind of goes up like Legos, which my grandson would think is super cool.
It is cool.
But it kind of goes up like Legos, and then they fill them with concrete.
So you've literally got you've got insulation on both sides, and then they kind of bring in an auger type system, and then they literally pour concrete into the center of it.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying then?
And I've posted the video of them filling on our YouTube page, Blue Collar Real Estate. But you end up with an R50 in your wall.
R50.
Yeah.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
And this is really cool, too. I was talking to the rep from the company the other day, and that wall will withstand hurricane force winds up to 230 miles an hour.
That's a little bit better than your 2x4 construction.
Yeah.
And foam board tacked onto it haphazardly.
Remember back when they started building houses like that, with half-inch foam board in the middle and just 2x4 walls and insulation. I lived in Rockville, Illinois at the time, and they had a series of break-ins because people would take a box knife and cut the vinyl siding, cut the foam board, and go right through the wall.
You can literally walk right through the wall. I mean, that's how it's constructed. Yep.
You're not doing that here. No. And if we can see a picture of the actual block itself, so there's one of the blocks.
Okay.
It's so cool, and you can see the way the knobbies are on top. There's male ends up there, female on the bottom, so it goes together, stacks up nice. The brackets in the middle, you can see the little U's. Those are for holding rebar, which is just long metal bars to add reinforcement to the concrete. When they're done with this, it is a freaking unbelievably cool system, and I can't wait to keep showing people. In fact, in another couple weeks, we're going to shoot some footage down there with the builder, go through some of the technologies, the green technologies he's using. We're going to talk to the rep from the company. So
we'll literally take people through this house. And again, if you're listening to this and you're not watching live, I mean, these pieces literally look like Lego blocks. Okay. I mean, you've got the little studs on top and you've got the female ends on the bottom, and they literally just fit together like a Lego block. It's cool as hell.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. So I want to kind of ask another question on this, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that maybe are asking, all right, so Ryan and Greg, that looks awesome, but that sounds a hell of a lot more expensive than 2x4 construction with that foam board on there. So let's kind of dive into that, just a little bit.
Okay.
But, obviously you are probably going to spend a couple more dollars on doing this, but, walk us through that. Is it a substantial amount more money to do something like this? Is it, about the same? What's that look like for our listeners?
It's about 10 or 12% upcharge.
It's not bad.
No. On a house that's going to be 2,500 some odd square feet, 10 or 12% for the energy efficiency you gain. Not only if there's a tornado,
right?
Don't look for shelter. Just sit in the living room and have a cup of coffee. So 10 or 12%, it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the gain that you get from it in structural integrity and energy efficiency, to me, way outweighs the extra cost.
I would agree. I love that. That is super, super cool. I can't wait to get out there and shoot some video out there of this house. So what else do we need to cover on this episode? We've talked about, 4 or 5 different ways that you can, retroactively save money on your heating and cooling bills right now, with the insulation, your HVAC system, getting a more efficient one, windows, the wall insulation, etc. What are we missing in this episode that we need to kind of put a bow tie on, Greg?
Well, I think what I want to leave people with, at least out of this episode, since we're just kind of introducing this coming series, is a couple of items. Number one, green doesn't have to be costly.
Yeah.
Number two, it's not all fringy products, which in the next episode we're going to get into. We're going to show some of the products they make with recycled materials. And the other thing is that the reduction in energy cost will often pay you back in a very short amount of time what you spend. Mm-hmm. And something we're not going to have time to get into today, we'll get into later, is cost versus tax incentives versus grants available.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother world that I think a lot of people will just, maybe haven't taken the time to explore. What are all of the tax incentives associated with all of these different products and building ways. If you just do a little research, it's amazing what's out there as far as grants and incentives to encourage people to take on products like this, because it goes back to what you said to open up this very show. This is about the stewardship of taking care of our world. We don't get another opportunity to have another one. And so how do we take care of what we're doing? I mean, I think we live in a world where, people are very focused on me.
Yeah.
However, we're not always going to be here, and so how do we leave the place better than when we found it? And I think it's just a collective effort of, people like us, and there's certainly millions of others around the world that do, care about this, because we don't get another chance. And when you just go about burning fossil fuels haphazardly, when you're hiring a contractor, does that contractor recycle shingles? I know, several roofing contractors that I do a lot of work with, that's very important to them. And they talk about that because, you're going to throw that stuff away and then it's just going to go sit in a landfill somewhere, versus why don't we reuse, that asphalt, the asphalt from those shingles, use it on roads, use it somewhere that it can be recycled. So that way you're really taking care of what we have here.
And there's little things, and I was just thinking about this while you were talking. We went through, when we remodeled our house, and every fixture we could, we put in LED bulbs. Mm-hmm. I have now added, as bulbs have died out, and every light in my home, in my 1,900 square foot ranch, every single light is LED. Mm-hmm. A lot of energy companies, I don't know where you live, but a lot of energy companies, if you contact them, Duke Energy or IPL or electric companies, they'll send you LED bulbs.
Yeah.
And the benefit to them is that if you're using less electricity, they have less infrastructure updates to do, or upgrades to do. Yeah. So the less we use, the more they benefit, the less we're producing. And that's just a little thing.
Everybody wins.
If you have to go buy them, you're going to go spend $20 or $30 at Menards. I
Easily.
I mentioned Menards because we spent a lot of time there this week.
I was running through the store,
which was fantastic. But
one last little story I want to share is homes that were built previously back in the post World War II, or even up through the early 2000s. There was a big building code change that happened in, I believe it was 2012. And I always like to tell the story when I'm working with somebody that's considering maybe building a brand new home versus looking at resale homes. And people always just look at their house payment, right? But one of the biggest factors that goes into that is, what are those energy bills? And here's where I'm going with this whole story. The very first home I ever built was a brand new Vinyl Village home. It was back in 2003, right? And this home was about just shy of 1,600 square foot, 1,596, I believe. And with this home, I mean, my average utility bill, I lived in this home and owned it for a long time. My average utility bill was right around $148. Okay, so about $148,
not bad.
Just shy of 1,600 square foot. And for the most part, it was just me living there. And I helped another gentleman build the exact same floor plan, exact same builder, and it was only about 2 miles south of where I built this home in Avon, Indiana. Again, same house, same floor plan, built almost 11 years later. His average bill a year later, after he lived in the house, was $72.
Wow.
So
because technology has changed that much?
Just because technology had changed that much. We were both single guys at the time, both living in a house by ourselves, and just simply the energy consumption difference between a brand new home versus a home that was built just 10 years prior was literally double. I was spending double what he was spending on his energy bills, and we didn't do anything different. He just had a newer home that had a hell of a lot more insulation in the attic than mine did, and newer window. I mean, just everything was better, and that was just a 10-year span, let alone what's that look like over a 40 or 50-year span with technology. So that's what's going to wrap up this episode. I hope everybody took something away from this, and we're kind of diving deep into a topic here. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, especially Greg on this. This is his world 1,000%, and we are here to help any way we possibly can. So again, for Blue Collar Real Estate, I'm Ryan Harrogate.
And I'm Greg Mayo. Thanks for watching.
Appreciate it.